In the small kingdom of Vaith, winter came early that year, and so did the debt collectors. The Ashworth family had once been respected landowners, but years of bad harvests and worse decisions had buried them under debts they could never repay. When the letter arrived from Wolfsbane, sealed with the mark of the Wolf King, Leora's father did not hesitate for long. The letter offered a simple trade: one daughter, given in marriage to the Wolf King, in exchange for the family's freedom from debt and a promise of peace between the two lands. Leora's father called a family meeting that evening, though everyone in the house already knew what he would say before he said it. "Leora will go," he announced, not looking at her. "She is the youngest. She has no suitors waiting. It is the sensible choice." Leora sat quietly at the end of the table, her hands folded in her lap, her face calm. No one in the room noticed how still she had gone, or how her eyes had sharpened for just a moment, before softening again into the obedient, gentle expression her family expected of her. They did not know their daughter. They had never truly known her. For 5 years, under the cover of darkness and a plain gray mask, Leora had lived a second life. She was known in whispered rumors across 3 kingdoms as the Ashen Hunter, a name spoken with fear by corrupt rulers and with quiet gratitude by the people they had wronged. 3 kings had died under her hand, each death arranged to look like sickness, or accident, or the judgment of fate. She had never once been caught. She had never once been suspected, certainly not by her own family, who believed she spent her nights sewing by candlelight and dreaming of nothing at all. She said nothing to defend herself that evening. There was no point. She had learned long ago that her family saw only what they wanted to see, and what they wanted to see was a daughter who could be given away without cost. 3 days later, Leora left her childhood home in a carriage bound for Wolfsbane, carrying only a small trunk and a secret too heavy for any trunk to hold. The Wolf King's stronghold rose out of the mountains, like something carved by the wind itself, dark stone walls and towers that seemed to watch the roads below. Leora had heard the stories, the same as everyone else. Cale Draven, the Wolf King, was said to be merciless, a man who had clawed his way to power through the ruin of his enemies. Some said he kept the bones of traitors in his throne room. Others said his own council feared to speak against him, for fear of vanishing in the night. Leora believed almost none of it. Stories grew teeth the further they traveled from the truth. But she had come prepared for the worst regardless. If the Wolf King proved to be the tyrant the stories described, she would not hesitate to become his 4th king slain. She was brought before him in a hall, lit by tall windows, and a fire that crackled low in the hearth. Cale Draven sat upon his throne, not as she expected. He did not lounge in cruelty or preen in his power. He sat with the tired posture of a man who had not slept properly in a long time, his eyes sharp but shadowed, watching her approach with an attention that made her skin prickle. "You are Leora Ashworth," he said. It was not a question. "I am," she answered, keeping her voice soft. Her eyes lowered in the way a frightened bride was expected to lower them. He studied her for a long moment, long enough that the silence in the hall grew heavy. "You do not walk like a girl who is afraid," he said finally. "You walk like a soldier pretending to limp." Leora's heart went still, though her face did not change. It was the first time in 5 years anyone had seen through her so quickly. She lifted her eyes to meet his, deciding in that instant that pretending further would be more dangerous than honesty. "And you do not sit like a king who enjoys his throne," she replied. Something flickered across his face, not anger, as she expected, but something closer to relief. "No," he admitted, "I do not." That night, Cale did not send for her as a husband might send for a new bride. Instead, he asked her to walk with him along the stronghold's highest wall, where the wind was cold and the stars were very bright. He told her, in careful and measured words, that the tales of his cruelty were not entirely true. He told her that his council, a group of advisors inherited from his father, had grown powerful and corrupt behind his back, using his name and his armies to commit crimes he had never ordered, and often did not learn about until it was too late. He was, in his own words, a king, trapped inside his own kingdom. Leora listened without giving away what she was thinking, though inside, A very old and careful part of her mind was already working through what he had told her, weighing it, testing it for lies the way she tested every piece of information before she acted on it. "Why tell me this?" she asked. "You do not know me." "Because I think," Kale said slowly, "that you are not the girl your family believes they sent me. And I think that whoever you truly are, you did not come here by accident." Leora said nothing for a long moment. Then, because something in his tired eyes reminded her of every person she had ever fought to protect, she made a decision that surprised even herself. "My name is Leora," she said quietly, "but there are people who know me by another name, the Ashen Hunter." She expected fear. She expected him to call his guards, to have her thrown into the dungeon, or worse. Instead, Kale Draven let out a long breath, as though a great weight had finally been set down. "I had hoped," he said, "that the rumors were true." Over the following weeks, an unlikely partnership grew between them. Kale showed her the private ledgers his council kept hidden from him, records of taxes collected but never reported, of soldiers sent on missions he had never authorized, of villages punished for crimes invented to justify the council's growing power. Leora, in turn, used the skills she had spent 5 years perfecting, moving unseen through the stronghold at night, gathering proof, listening at doors no one expected a bride to listen at. It was during one of these quiet investigations that Leora found something that made her blood run cold. Hidden among the council's private letters was a name she recognized, her father's name, written beside a sum of money and a single word, arranged. She brought the letter to Kale in the dead of night, her hands trembling for the first time in years. Together, they pieced together a truth far darker than either had imagined. Leora's family had not fallen into debt by misfortune alone. A hidden organization, one that had quietly manipulated royal families across the continent for generations, had engineered her family's ruin, specifically so that Leora would be sent to Wolfsbane. They had known, somehow, of her secret life as the Ashen Hunter. They had guided her hand for years, feeding her false information about tyrants who needed to die, though in truth, some of those kings had simply refused to bow to the organization's demands. Leora sat very still, as the truth settled over her like ice water. Every king she had killed, she had believed she was delivering justice. Instead, she had been a weapon, aimed and fired by people who never once revealed themselves. And now, she realized with a slow and terrible clarity, she had been sent to Wolfsbane to kill again. Kale Draven was meant to be her fourth target, the final piece in whatever plan the organization had been building for years. "They are still watching," Kale said quietly, once she had finished explaining. "They will know their plan has failed if I am still alive by the new moon. They will send someone else." He was right. 3 nights later, a small group of armed strangers slipped into the stronghold under cover of darkness, moving with the same quiet skill that Leora herself had once used. They were not common thieves or assassins for hire. They moved like people who had been trained the same way she had been trained, by the same shadowed hands. Leora and Kale met them in the throne hall, the fire long since burned to embers, the tall windows dark with night. There, for the first time, Leora did not hide behind quiet obedience or a soft, lowered gaze. She stood beside the Wolf King, not as tribute, not as bride, but as an equal, prepared to defend the kingdom she had been sent to destroy. The confrontation was swift and careful, guided more by strategy than by chaos. Leora's years of training, once used in secret and in service of a lie, were finally used for a purpose she chose for herself. Kale fought beside her, not as a tyrant feared by his people, but as a man defending the home he had always wanted to protect properly. By the time the first light of dawn touched the mountain peaks, the intruders had been driven out, their plans in ruins, their identities exposed enough to trace back toward the organization that had sent them. In the days that followed, Kale and Leora worked together to unravel the last threads of the Shadow Council's corruption, presenting the proof they had gathered to the kingdom's remaining honest advisors and allies. The corrupt council members were removed from power, their crimes finally laid bare for the people they had wronged. Word of the hidden organization's manipulation spread quietly to other kingdoms, a warning passed carefully among rulers who had unknowingly been pawns in the same game Leora had been forced to play. Leora returned to her family's home only once more, not out of anger, though anger would have been understandable, but out of a need to see the truth settled clearly between them. She told her father, gently but plainly, that she knew what he had done, and that she forgave the fear that had driven him to it, even if she could not forget it. She did not stay long. There was nothing left there for her to reclaim, only a quiet goodbye to a life she had never truly belonged to. She returned to Wolfsbane, not as a tribute given away to settle a debt, but as someone who had chosen, freely and clearly, to stay. Standing beside Kale on the highest balcony of the stronghold, watching the sun rise gold and quiet over the mountains, Leora finally allowed herself to feel something she had not felt in 5 long years. Not the careful stillness of a hunter waiting for her next target, but something softer, something that felt, for the first time, like peace. Her family had given her away, believing they were offering the Wolf King a quiet, unremarkable bride. They never knew they had given him the one person capable of saving his kingdom, and in turn, of finally saving herself. The wind moved gently across the mountain peaks, as the two of them stood together, no longer strangers bound by circumstance, but partners bound by choice. Somewhere far below, in a small house in Vaith, a family would spend the rest of their lives never fully understanding what they had truly given away that winter. But Leora no longer needed them to understand. She had found, at last, a place where she did not have to hide who she truly was, and a person who had seen her clearly from the very first moment they met. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, that was enough.